It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Yes, it is another installment of JC and Morgan, number 245, I do believe. Somebody will correct me that someone would be Mad Dog Phil Mullinax if I'm wrong. You can't see him, but trust me, he is there. He is behind the curtain like the magical Wizard of Oz, keeping us technically sound, operating the controls, inserting guests through the VIP curtain and onto the dance floor. And today that guest will be Matt Moscona of 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge. I'll be honest, of all the guests we've had, I don't know Matt. Like I do know Matt from whenever I'm in Baton Rouge to call a game, I turn on the radio. And I've always thought he is very good at what he does. As someone who has spent a lot of years in talk radio, I love his ability to run a show. And for me, when it comes to LSU, and a lot of talented people that cover that program, but I think he's right at the top of the list. So I wanted to get him on, and he was anxious to do it. We'll have him on at the top of the hour. For those listening live, I say top of the hour. We are recording this live on Tuesday morning, June the 18th. JC, who is back from a very successful surgery. We didn't want anybody to worry last week, so we pointed that out, that this was nothing severe. I'll let him tell you about that in a second. Our thanks again to Tom Luganbill sitting in last week. Luke's bringing the heat as he always does. We'll check back in with him and some of our other regulars like Brando, etc. But JC, as I look at the clock, this is courtesy of CFBselect.com. I got to be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with that site, but I'm sure they do good work. But I was looking for an exact clock till week 0. So as we sit here on this Tuesday morning, according to CFB Select, which has a running clock to the first game in Dublin on week 0, that'll be noon Eastern, 5 o'clock Dublin time, if you're familiar with the European time difference. We are 67 days, 3 hours, and 23 minutes away from the start of the college football season in earnest. So that ought to bring a smile to everybody's face, because 67 days can fly by. It really can, in the midst of a good and eventful summer.
Absolutely right. We'll have a little, Chief Sports, ITG, our other show. We'll have a little hiatus at the beginning of July, which is always good to recharge the batteries and plan for the forthcoming football season. And I know that like July, like back when I was like an 8-year-old and I still am once we get close to kickoff. I mean, you know this, Mike. I think we spent opening Saturday in Atlanta together a few years back. And
good times.
I think I didn't sleep the night before. I think you saw me out there on the porch at 6 o'clock.
But you made up for it in cocktail quantity the next day.
Yes, I did. I was like a trooper the whole time. But anyway, I mean, but normally I'd get to July, and when I worked in national recruiting, I was on the road just about the whole month. After July 4th, you hit the road. The opening. Sometimes Elite 11 was then. There was a 7-on-7 in Birmingham, one in Texas. They had one in Orlando at the end of the month. You had all kinds of recruiting events, scouting wise. During July, so I'd stay on a plane all of July and come back, and boom, then practice starts. And it was nice for me then because recruiting kind of died down at that point in August. Mm-hmm. So it was always nice to kick back, and I knew that, all right, the season's coming, and I'd anticipate it. So it's always happy to get to that July 4th. Now, life has hit. I'm 47. You got kids graduating. You got licenses being applied for and driving tests, and you got a wonderful wife now, and home improvement and honeydews and all that. So it doesn't mean the same to me as maybe it once did. Not that I was single. I was married at that time, but we were kind of empty nesters, back then. So It was, and I was on the road all the time. So it wasn't as good, but I always look forward to this time of the year, and because you could just sort of feel the anticipation, where baseball's winding down out in Omaha, and once that happens, if it hadn't already, most college sports fans are looking towards the gridiron, and this offseason is going by fast, and certainly it'll be a lot of new, I don't want to say toys, but a lot of new elements of the sport this year to kind of get a grasp on.
No doubt. You mentioned Omaha has been a really entertaining College World Series. The SEC kind of flexing its muscle again there. Is all two conferences, SEC and ACC. And the ACC, other than the fact they haven't won the big one, but once in like 70 years, has been a prominent baseball program. And then with all the talk about the ACC's potential demise or at bare minimum contraction of its major programs, it's just one more kind of gut punch. You know, the Pac had that where they enjoyed one of their best football seasons in years right before it completely got dismantled. And I wonder if the ACC is going to face the same doom. The other thing that happened yesterday that got me thinking, you know, it's for me, it's like Kevin Bacon, 6 degrees. 6 degrees of anything in the sports world I can bring back to college football. So I'm watching some of the NBA finals last night. Congratulations to the Celtics, which is my childhood team, by the way. I don't have the same affinity for them as I used to, but that's still my childhood team. But as I'm watching, and I went over the rosters on our sister show, ITG, part of Chief Sports Network, and you know, and the different ties. But the fact that this is what, again, separates college football from the other sports. This is why the NFL draft is so popular and the other drafts just, they don't nearly register, is because you've got college football players for 3 years. Now, they bounce around from program to program more than ever before. We basically have free agency without contracts in college football. But like, as I'm watching, with the exception of Al Horford, congratulations to Al. I actually played high school ball with a cousin of his years and years ago. You know, people know he won 2 titles with Billy Donovan in Florida. He played there 3 years. Everybody else is either a Euro or a one and done. I know there's a couple more exceptions, but so there's so little identity with any of those guys who are college fans because you only saw them for like I remember doing Jason Tatum's first game at Duke for ESPN years ago, and he was hurt at the beginning of the year. He played like 20 games, and it was like, then he was gone. It's just a way station for so many of those guys. The college game is. Whereas if you watch a Super Bowl, all these guys you remember from college playing 3-4 years, you feel like there's more skin in the game. So I thought about that just watching some of the game last night.
By the way, it's a lamest product going right now because of it's not even a team sport to me sometimes, because I mean, you look at like, what was a game 4? The Celtics lost 124-88, but they handled them the rest of the time. What that tells me is in that game 4, they just quit playing midway through.
They mailed it in.
Screw this, I'm done. You know, I mean, sports like that's not a sport. I mean, man, you gotta get after it, dude. That's what people pay their money for. And then you have the load management and all this stuff. And yeah, but look, the NBA is a successful product financially. They're the greatest athletes in the world in a lot of ways. So there's always going to be an audience for it. But as far as the affinity audience, you're right. Hit the nail on the head.
Let's just hope that things like bowl game opt-outs and the sort don't continue to infect college football, the sport that we love.
I think they need to pay the players to play the bowls. I mean,
no question.
It's the biggest no-brainer. Like it's kind of funny. I was sitting there for years talking about give them some of the TV money because that is NIL. What are they doing? Oh, yeah, TV money's same thing with that. By the way, was it Tito Horford you played with?
No, Kelly. Kelly was Tito's much younger brother, and he had a thick Dominican accent. And we played together at the Norm Sloan camp back when like prominent head coaches put their name on a pamphlet for a team camp, and you'd see him like one day. And that one day, in the case of Norm Sloan, he came out on the final day of the camp, and I was like, oh, okay, this is the guy that is on the brochure. It's the guy that led NC State to a national championship back in '74. And he basically dog cussed the entire group because a few of the teams left the dorms in bad shape. They didn't clean up after themselves. And that was Norm. Norm just dog cussed a bunch of teenagers, walked off, and we never saw him again.
Welcome
was
to Norm Sloan Camp.
Yes, that
Camp
was my whole
Snow.
experience.
Wow.
It's like, okay, those 5 days were a lesson in humility. Get your rear end kicked by some of the best players in the country, day in, day out, and then get dog cussed by a Hall of Fame coach. And then, okay, here's your T-shirt. Go home, everybody. That was a fun experience.
Wow.
There's a lot I want to get to, and we got Matt at the top of the hour. So let's dive right into the JC5.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number
All right, Mike.
1.
I'm throwing all quarterback questions at you today.
Okay. Oh,
So first,
QB centric.
First question is, who will be the next Lincoln Riley quarterback? He's got a guy, Moss Miller, that's out there, but he's got another transfer in Jaden Medea from UNLV, who led UNLV to a record season last year. I think it's Medea. At some point, does Lincoln Riley need to develop a guy over 4 years to maintain his reputation? Because it seems that he kind of takes other people's starting points.
Right.
So he's kind of a finisher. He's kind of the guy you call in to decorate rather than the guy to build. Go ahead.
Boy, that's a great point. I think the biggest thing for me on Lincoln is that if he doesn't figure out how to be the head coach of a team that has not a great defense, but a respectable defense, which he's never seemed to have. I mean, maybe there was 1 year at Oklahoma where like, oh, those guys are nasty. Now, he had talent on defense at Oklahoma. There are guys in the NFL that played for Lincoln Riley on defense at Oklahoma, but that didn't stop them from surrendering like 40 points a game in the Big 12. And like, oh, well, now he's got Southern Cal athletes, and now and it's a different style, and they still suck on defense. And they still have woefully underachieved. No matter who the quarterback is, it's not going to be somebody with the skill set of Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams, for his flaws, was clearly everybody's number 1 pick at quarterback in the NFL draft. Whether or not he pans out in the NFL, I don't know. But he was the number 1 pick in the draft. And he does have, like, when you watch Caleb Williams on tape, the things that scouts look for, there's certain things that are like, okay, that's a rare bird. There's a little bit of Mahomes in there in terms of the way he can throw off platform and do all kind of neat things. I'm not saying he's nearly that kind of player. But my point is that I don't think they have anybody that's going to be that good in the immediate future. He's going to keep getting quarterbacks. Number one, he's at a program that is very attractive to quarterback recruits. He's in a talent-rich quarterback state in California, and he's got a track record. Well, you're going to get him, JC, but I don't know if that's going to mean they're going to win anymore. And I think the honeymoon is over with Lincoln and Southern Cal in terms of, well, we are just still giddy about spending all this money and giving all these things to our prodigal son, the guy that's going to save Southern Cal football and bring us back to prominence. I don't know if this is Pete Carroll 2.0. It might just be Lincoln Riley 2.0.
Yeah, you look at their schedule. Luga Bills brought this up. LSU in Vegas, Utah State, at Michigan, Wisconsin at home, at Minnesota in October, Penn State at home, at Maryland across the country, Rutgers at home, at Washington. Washington will be down. Nebraska at home, at UCLA and Notre Dame. So it does lighten up, but man, you got LSU, Michigan, Wisconsin, 3 out of the first 4 in a tricky road game at Minnesota where it's going to be a little chilly in October up there. I don't know what to think.
Number 2.
Could Ohio State's quarterback situation cause it not to be the super team everybody anticipates them being this year? Is it that iffy, Mike, when you look at Walker Howard and those guys?
I mean, they basically threw the last guy out like yesterday's garbage, right? It was almost like a subliminal message, like it's all his fault. Everything everybody else did, including the coaching staff, was outstanding. But that quarterback, he's got to go. So now, you bring in a guy, again, this is the new age of college football. You don't groom people. You don't develop. You just go in the portal and you grab a more established product and you kind of fast track it to getting the starting job. Look, I still think with everything that Ohio State did this offseason, the mentality is that as long as the quarterback is good, not great, but good, Ohio State, there's nothing they can do that would derail them from winning the Big Ten, getting into the playoff, and competing for a national championship because they're loaded all over the place. And on top of that, I mean, you get Chip Kelly over there to run your offense or be a big part of it. And Ryan Day, it's put up or shut up. I mean, Ryan kind of walks around like he's done a whole lot, but they'll fire his you know what if he does not beat Michigan this year. That is a stone cold guarantee as far as I'm concerned. So I would expect the quarterback play to be better, yes, but I don't know if either one of those guys right off the bat like excite me. I don't know if I'm juiced about their quarterback situation overall. You just have to think it's going to be better than it was a year ago, which it wasn't awful last year. Let's be clear on that. It wasn't terrible, but clearly that was the scapegoat for Ohio State's inability to beat Michigan and get to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, McCord's at Syracuse right now. I saw somebody pick them to go 8-4 this year. I mean, they have a terrible schedule, but it's but it's very interesting to see. I'm intrigued by Walker Howard's run pass ability and Chip Kelly's offense, depending on what Chip does. Maybe I would hope Chip maybe goes back to his college roots a little bit, runs a little Oregon style stuff. I think that'll be fun to watch. All right, next one.
Number 3.
All right, you're the GM at a college. There are people that have that job now, Mike. And Cade Klubnik from Clemson and DJ Ungalalai, who just wants to go to a fourth school, are both in the portal. They both want to come. You got NIL money to pay for both. They're both the same demand. Everything's equal. Who are you taking between those two?
You're going to be surprised by this answer. I'm probably going DJ. DJ showed me a little something at Oregon State last year. And I don't think he had the talent around him that Klubnik did at Clemson. So Uiagalelei would be my guy. I think Uiagalelei was not ready when the lights were shining brightest on him as the next savior at Clemson. And then he had to take a trip to humble Pie Town, goes to a lesser profile school, figures things out. You and I went over this again on our sister show, JC, because DJ was an Elite 11 guy, I'm assuming, right? He had to be.
Mm.
Yeah. Elite 11 guys typically nowadays, I know 20 years ago, this might have been more of an inexact science, but 27 of the 32 NFL starters last year in the NFL and pro football were Elite 11 guys. 16 of the last 17 quarterbacks to win the Heisman, Elite 11 guys. My point is that you have the talent, you have the raw skills if you are as highly touted as DJ was, but that doesn't mean between the years you're ready. And I think now he is. I think Florida State will benefit from his services. They're not going to be as talented as they were a year ago, but I would take DJ. Who would you take?
DJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 4.
Okay.
All right, Mike. Miami Hurricanes football, everybody's favorite topic, off-season topic that is. Since Coker took them to back-to-back Peach Bowls, and Peach Bowl wasn't like a New Year's Six Bowl then. So since the 03 Orange Bowl, that's 21 years before they were in the ACC. They've been to one New Year's Day bowl game. That was the Orange in 17 when Rick won the division. It's also the only year they've won 10 games. This is how mediocre they've been since then. With 1, 2, 3, 4. They're on their 6th head coach. Mario Cristobal did just as well as Dan Lanning in his later years at Oregon. He was a caged animal hire. They paid him a bunch of money. He's 12-13. I see 11-1, 10-2 picks. So my question for you is, maybe it's not the culture. Maybe it's not the coaching. One thing Miami has not had is a fantastic quarterback. And they've let Lamar Jackson and Teddy Bridgewater and a lot of guys out of South Florida leave. So is Cam Ward, who had a really good year at Washington State last year, everybody wanted him, is Cam Ward the man to bring? Is it that important to have an elite quarterback to where he will be the man to bring the Hurricanes out of the wilderness?
You mean the pride of Incarnate Word, which is where he started his college career before Washington State, now in his 3rd school? I think, let's not forget Tyler Van Dyke, by the way. Tyler Van Dyke was a Heisman Trophy candidate at Miami a few years ago. He had so much promise, and it looked like they had their guy. They had their next quarterback at the U, and then Van Dyke had injuries, and then Van Dyke, it's like he forgot how to throw a football. It was unmistakably crazy. So then the question becomes, well, how much of it was Van Dyke and how much of it was the U, dog? It's all about the U. We're going to find out because Van Dyke is at Wisconsin, and they've got Phil Longo. I think Wisconsin's going to be one of the most fascinating stories in college football this year. I mean, they just signed T.Y. Hilton's son. It's hard to believe T.Y. Hilton has a son old enough to play. T.Y. Hilton's in like his mid-30s, but he does. And his son just signed. He could have played wide receiver at a lot of schools. He chose Wisconsin. Why? Well, because they're selling everybody on that. That's a new offense. Anyway, I got off track there. Cam Ward is being painted as the savior, but again, I think Miami has bigger issues. For one, you got to take a knee when you're up against Georgia Tech. That's a big boo-boo on Mario's part. But look, you're right. You look at like Vegas odds and stuff. Everybody is just hyping up Miami as like a 9-10 win team. Maybe it's there, but I've seen this movie too many times before. I think Cam Ward certainly was a great pickup. It's what they needed to stabilize the quarterback spot. But I'm not so sure that they're going to have the kind of year that everybody seemingly wants them to have.
I think we're going to know a lot that game in Gainesville because Florida's roster is no better. Probably not as good as Miami's on paper. They've got a lot of unknowns. Obviously, there's the hot seat talk with Napier, and they got a tough schedule. And that's one the Gators think they can pull out and win.
Right.
So we're going to find out. When you go into a hostile environment like that and you lay an egg and lose, and you can't score, and it's the same old. I think it's going to be same old Miami. If they go in there and win, let's say they will beat them pretty good. You can see something else, out of them. So, but anyway, we waited 21 years for them to be back, about as long as Bears fans have been waiting for excellence. And that's a topic of my final question of the JC5.
Number 5.
All right, Mike, we're just going to switch to the NFL because it's quarterback related. And it's football, and it's kind of college because we talk about the draft here. All right, better bet. NFL 2024. Bears over 8.5 wins or Falcons over 9.5 wins?
Oh, gosh. I did not have this on my bingo card. Again, I am not prepped on these questions that JC throws out. I like the element of surprise. Did you say Falcons was what number?
9.5.
Gosh, I've got them at 9 and 7, and the Bears are at 8.5.
Well, so they play 17 games now, though.
Yeah.
So 9 and 8 or 10 and 7.
Well, I'll take the under on the Bears, and I'll say that Kirk Cousins does enough. I'll take the Falcons on that one. I'm not sold on the Bears just because of Caleb Williams. Now they've improved other stuff too. They've improved their entire roster. There's no doubt about that, but. Yeah, I'm gonna be conservative on Chicago. I'll be a little more bullish on Atlanta. These are not two NFL franchises that I really want to invest a lot of my hard-earned money in or stock in. Like, it's always an easier bet to say take the under on either one of them. But since you posed, I have to pick one. I'll take the Falcons on that.
Next is coming a combined win total for the Commanders and Panthers next year.
I was gonna say
that's next. So anyway, no, I took the Bears over, and and I've probably had an advantage. I've looked at their schedule, and it's one of the easier schedules.
Well, it should be because the NFL, you get last place team gets a last place schedule.
They do play the Commanders, and they do play the Cardinals, and they do play the Panthers, and they play a lot of teams they can beat. Plus the division, Minnesota's kind of that other team besides Green Bay. They got issues now. Detroit should be good again. But
Detroit
the Bears
should own that division.
But the Bears beat them like a drum
with Green Bay.
Soldier Field, and then blew a lead to Detroit over there. So I don't know. I'm going to keep the faith and say they go over. My wife was mad because I talked bad about the Leprechaun in Notre Dame yesterday, so I'm going to give her a solid and say Bears go over the 8.5 this year.
Okay, Fair enough.
There we go.
Fair enough. And that concludes the JC5. We'll have some other interesting numbers to get to. Also, Group 5, John is back with a factoid that the little guy can appreciate, including one little guy that's now a big guy. Coming up next, Matt Moscona of ESPN Baton Rouge. We'll talk a little LSU football and other things with Matt when we come back on JC and Morgan.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. Site Pro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. Site Pro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call Site Pro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit siteprorentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable. Because this movement is just beginning.
All right, welcome back. It is JC and Morgan, presented by Nest and Wild Mattress, nestandwild.com, the most comfortable mattress on the market. And here's the thing. You give them a phone call. You can go to the website, nestandwild.com. They'll have the phone number right on there. Here's when you call up, like you actually speak to the owner of the business. It's a national business out of Tupelo, Mississippi, led by Brandon Jameson. And he'll actually answer the phone, and he'll actually complete your order, answer any questions that you have. And then you'll be in line for the most comfortable mattress, the most comfortable pillows. Now they've got bed frames to go along with it. They've got you covered soup to nuts at Nest and Wild, like sleeping on a cloud, like sleeping on top of a cloud. Something I've felt many times in my day, but usually that's after a few too many shots of something. That's Nest and Wild, nestandwild.com. All right, our guest now. And I mentioned this, Matt. I was throwing you flowers at the beginning. So if your ears were burning, just know it was in a good way. You and I have never met, right? We've never spoken. But I've said this before. When I'm in town to do a game, and I've been to Baton Rouge several times over the years, one of the first things I do is I tune into the local show, on the radio. And I found your station years ago, and it's usually afternoon drive that I'm listening to, and there you are. And I've always thought, like, first of all, you have a good sound on radio. I'm still kind of particular about that. I think that matters if you're hosting a daily show. And I just love the way you operate your show. So you've kind of become, for me, the gospel of LSU sports. So let me start with that kind introduction and welcome you aboard, and consider this an introduction for me and for JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports as well.
Well, gentlemen, it's a pleasure. I think Mike and JC, I think at some point over the last 14 years, you both have been a guest on my radio show. So
you're probably right. Yes,
we've met here. So
right,
yeah.
Very nice.
Some kind of recruiting something I probably was on down there.
No doubt, man. You know what you learn? So 14 years of doing radio. I've actually been doing radio for 20 years, but my current show 14. 3 hours a day. I mean, you literally do tens of thousands of hours of radio. I've done like tens of thousands of interviews. There's people I've had on the show I just totally forget we're ever on. I'll go look in the archives. I'm like, I talked to Steve Young. It's like, yeah, okay, I did talk to Steve Young. Anyway, but it's a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, guys.
No, absolutely. It's a weird time in Baton Rouge, isn't it? From a football standpoint. And I had to go back and kind of look at this. So, Brian Kelly has caught some heat. And I think Brian Kelly's an excellent football coach. He's got 2 10-win seasons. There's a lot of programs in college football that would kill for that. But if you look at kind of where the season finished, you've got in the AP poll, just for example, the 16-12, the last 2 finishes. We know the last 2 years under Ed Orgeron, not good. We know about the national title in 2019. 2018 was a top 10 finish. In fact, even Les Miles had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, Les Miles actually had a really, if you just go on top 10 finishes. He won the one national title, and then people thought he was a goofball, and he did dumb things in dumb situations. But LSU football, I go back to, I don't know how old you are, Matt, but I go back to the late 80s, my introduction to SEC football, just as a fan, and then the 90s, and LSU football was decent. It wasn't great. And then it became a juggernaut. Saban to Miles to Orgeron all won a national title. So where is LSU football now? What is the expectation level now? Going back in your time, you've watched this roller coaster. What is the status of the program as a whole?
Yeah, so I'm 42. Was born in New Orleans, lived in Baton Rouge most of my life, went to LSU. My senior season was the 03 national title. So I was there for Nick's years in Baton Rouge. I was a student at LSU.
Nice.
But my earliest recollections of LSU football were Mike Archer, Curly Hallman. So I remember the 6 straight losing seasons.
Yes.
So when Nick comes to town, and Jared DiNardo, had some success. I had a 10-win season in 1996 and had some really nice wins. He just couldn't sustain it. But when Nick got here and they won the SEC in 2001, Atlanta felt like forbidden fruit for LSU fans. And remember, by the time 03 came along, it had been 45 years since LSU had won a national title. Not that dissimilar from the door Kirby just kicked in, where at Georgia, where they went more than 40 years between championships. So in many respects, you wonder, like, are you ever going to get there? And then once you do, you want to hold on like hell.
Mm-hmm.
What Nick did was he built a foundation. He showed a path. Louisiana, guys, I often say this. I'm sure JC would agree with his recruiting background. Louisiana is one of 3 states whereby, or LSU, I should say, is one of 3 schools whereby you are the only Power 5 in a talent-rich state. And that is an inherited advantage. It's LSU, it's Georgia, and it's Ohio State. Now, with respect to Georgia Tech, they're just not fishing in the same pond.
Right.
So Nick found a way to keep the best guys home, won the title in 03, and every coach has followed that blueprint with trying to keep the best guys in Louisiana home. And you look at the best players in the NFL from LSU, they're Louisiana, with the exception of Joe Burrow, but Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and go down the list, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. And I mean, it's all dudes that were from Louisiana that they were able to keep home. So I think it took Brian Kelly, guys, when he got hired and he brought Brian Polian in as recruiting coordinator, that was a miss. Like, I think he realized there was talent in the state. I don't think he realized how heavily he just had to double down on that. But the staff changes he's made and the bumper crop in this state in 25 and 26, there's a real feeling that in the next 3 seasons, Brian Kelly should be winning a national title again. And that's just when you've had 3 coaches win championships here, and 2 of them are Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. When Brian Kelly rolls in and you give that dude the resources, the expectation is that he's going to win the last game. And he should have the roster to do it in the next couple of years.
Let me ask you this. It's strange because Louisiana is a D-line heaven state. I mean, you can throw a rock from Baton Rouge. I loved – that was one of my favorite states to cover because there's just freak, gigantic athletes everywhere. And it's really the I-10 corridor. If you go from Houston over through Mobile, maybe over to Panhandle a little bit, all the way to Jacksonville, sort of, but especially that Mobile to Houston area, tons of D-linemen. And I look at LSU's roster now, and I'm like, wow, they're kind of lacking there. At the same time, I'm looking at it, I've seen this big run on receivers really since Odell Beckham and Landry and those guys. I mean, it's been a while since Louisiana hadn't produced just absolute studs. You're talking best of the best in the NFL type guys.
Yeah.
has it flipped maybe a little bit, or did Kelly miss on some D linemen? Did the attrition under Orgeron hurt that position? I know Bo Davis is going to get it turned around because he's one of the best ever to do it. But recruiting, coaching, whatever you want, Bo Davis is the man. But for right now, I mean, what's the status there of that D line? Because that's the one thing I look at and go, that's very un-LSU like on paper heading into this year.
Yeah, JC, LSU had a run of a decade where they had a defensive lineman drafted for 10 straight years, which hadn't at that point by any other school been touched. When you think about that, it's pretty remarkable. But the answer to all of your questions are yes and yes and yes and yes. But remember, Louisiana's always produced great receiving talent. It's just LSU didn't throw the ball under Les Miles. You had Ruben Randall and you had top flight talent. You just didn't throw it to him. I mean, I remember this guy named James Wright, who was a 7th round pick of the Bengals after literally not catching a pass in his last season at LSU. So the state's always had great receiving talent and skill talent, cornerbacks, running backs. Where they've been deficient at times is elite offensive linemen and quarterback. But you're right on the defensive line, and the state has had them. The problem is certainly there was attrition after Ed Orgeron. They had to go ham in the portal. And then you had guys like, for example, Mason Smith. Mason Smith, when he was coming out of the river region, out of the Bayou region, was the highest graded defensive lineman ever out of the Bayou region. And he was awesome as a freshman. He tore his ACL, missed his whole sophomore year. And then last year, it was probably just a little feeling out period, getting back into the game, and it just never really manifested for him. So they're trying to get it back. But if you look at the number one player in the country for 2026, it's a defensive lineman from St. Aug in New Orleans.
That guy's nasty. He is nasty. I mean, yeah.
And it'll be a stunner if he's not here because Brian Kelly has Frank Wilson on staff, and Frank Wilson's a St. Aug guy. And just like Leonard Fournette and Tyrann Mathieu and Trey Turner and dozens before him, dudes from Aug go to LSU, and it'll be a stunner if they don't get him. So, like I said, the bumper crop is there in 25 and 26 in this state.
Speaking of stunner, I was beyond stunned at how bad LSU's defense was a year ago. Now, I mean, we could talk about maybe a dip in talent. They lost some guys. They lose guys, like you mentioned, to the draft every year, just on the defensive line alone. But what sticks out to me about that defense and the last two under Orgeron, number one, taking Perkins out of his natural position, that was a mammoth mistake, it seems to me. But number two, the lack of discipline. Holy smokes. I mean, it's like we all know there's athletes out there, but it's guys loafing on plays. It's missed assignments. It's just there's been way too much of that in like 3 out of the last 4 years in Baton Rouge. Am I wrong?
Well, 20 under Bo Pelini was the worst defense in LSU history.
Yeah.
And then 2023 bested or worst that one as the worst defense in LSU history. So you're pretty on point. And it's stunning. I mean, Dave Aranda left for the Baylor job after the national championship in 2019. They brought in Pelini. That was just a disaster. Bo was catching a check. I mean, you'd hear stories about they'd have an 8:00 meeting. He's screaming over the train tracks on Skip Ertman Drive at 7:59. He just wasn't bought in. They brought in Durante Jones. The first time he had been a defensive coordinator since Division II a decade prior. It was just a terrible hire by Orgeron. It got him fired. And then Brian Kelly came in, and Matt House looked like a good hire, guys. He had NFL pedigree. He had been a really good defensive coordinator at Kentucky, and I think he just didn't communicate his message to his guys, and the rest of the staff was just bad. I mean, we could talk about like defensive back talent at LSU, right? I mean, I don't mean to get into the DBU argument. LSU, Florida, Ohio State, they're all really good, right? But Corey Raymond was the guy who had birthed that. Brian Kelly didn't retain him. And he brought in Robert Steeples. Robert Steeples was a high school coach who did 1 year with the Minnesota Vikings at an intern level. Then his first major college job was LSU. I mean, Brian Kelly just missed on some of those staff members. But if JC mentioned Bo Davis coming in now. So he's fixed his staff with much more credible and accomplished guys at this level. Yeah. And now they got to get the talent back up. And guys, I don't think it's there in 2024. Like LSU is not going to be a top 20 defense in the country. But honestly, I don't think they need to be. They just need to be not the worst defense in the history of the program again. Because if your offense is going to score 40 which this one can. We can talk about it, but like when your offense is that good, you just need to be good enough to play complementary football. I tell people this all the time. That 2019 offense LSU had, it's the greatest offense I've seen in a college team ever. And I think many would agree with that. That defense that year was ranked 59th in the country in total defense. Now, they when they needed to be great, they were. But they didn't need to hold teams to 9 points a game because they were scoring 50 a game. Just don't be the worst ever. And I think that's kind of the charge with this team.
Yeah, by the way, for our audience out there, just wanted to, and then I got a point on this D-line thing you were talking about because I'm familiar with the guy they hired last year. For those of you that don't follow 2026 recruiting, and I've gotten into 2026 a little bit just now, Jakeem Stewart from St. Aug, number 1 D lineman in the country. That's the guy that's absolutely disgustingly nasty, awesome. You name it. Compare him to Clowney if you want. And then another 5-star Lamar Brown from University Lab in Baton Rouge, another 5-star safety Blaine Bradford from Catholic in Baton Rouge, and then a 4-star offensive tackle Bryson Martinez, and a safety from Edna Carr, Aiden Hall. Round out the top 5 in that state. All 5 right now are 24/7 Sports Composite top 50 national prospects. It's a loaded year in Louisiana.
It's coming down to LSU and Louisiana Tech for those guys. Right?
Yeah, Tulane. Yeah, the Green Bay.
That's the point. It's not Alabama, Auburn. It's not Florida State, Miami. It's not Texas A&M, TCU, Texas Tech. It's a lot of these dudes grow up. They would give their arm to put on the purple and gold and run through the tunnel in Tiger Stadium. It's a massive advantage for LSU.
Yeah, even like in Mississippi and South Carolina, where they have a lot of talent and smaller population, you got to compete with other. Mississippi State got each other. Clemson and Carolina do. I got to see Jimmy Lindsey coach for 2 years in South Carolina, and this is no offense to him because bless him, he's a great man, and I certainly hope his health is okay. Very curious hire to me when they said he's going to LSU, and this was in June. I was like, that's kind of curious to me. So I'm with you on that. I think Bo Davis is an upgrade. And that's nothing personal against Jimmy. I didn't think he was all that great here. So, you know,
I think, so full disclosure, I like Jimmy Lindsey a ton. I did talk to Jimmy a couple of weeks ago. He's at North Carolina now, and he was back in Baton Rouge tying up some loose ends, and I got to have dinner with he and his wife.
He's a great guy. I mean, nothing wrong with
He's doing great. And honestly, he comes from that Ed Ogeron, like Pete Jenkins, Ed Ogeron tree of defensive line coaches, and he's a great recruiter. I think that was a really good hire. The problem is LSU's defensive line went through, like when Mason Smith in his 3 years, he had 5 or 6 different defensive line coaches because you had Jamar Cain who left in spring for the Broncos. They had Gerald Chapman as an interim. Then they hired Jimmy Lindsey, who had his health scare right before the start of last season. They promoted John Jancic. Then they brought in Pete Jenkins in the middle of the season to help. I mean, that's a lot of different voices. I think Jimmy Lindsey would have done a fine job at LSU had he not had the health scare and had he been given the opportunity. But the real problem was when Jimmy Lindsey fell ill, they moved John Jancic into the defensive line role. And John had he's a veteran coach. He's been a defensive coordinator in the SEC. He's just never coached defensive line. So it was just this confluence of circumstances that went very badly.
That's good to know about him. It's good to know. I like I said, I have a lot of respect for him and like him. It's just obviously you're coaching a different level down there of players, but any kind of transition like that has to be tough on your players. 3 or 4 different position coaches. Man. So it's good to know he's doing well and with the Tar Heels and living life. So he's a good man.
Our guest is Matt Moscona of 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge. He's been hosting that show for how many years now, did you say?
20 years in all-in radio, 14 hosting Afternoon Drive on the ESPN affiliate.
Good for you. And you guys are simulcasted in New Orleans, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm syndicated kind of all over the state. New Orleans, Alexandria, Lafayette, Lake Charles. So our little engine that could has kind of grown that's a lot over the last decade and a half.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always glad to see stories like that. We've talked so much about the decline of local radio on this show and others, but it's good to see when people are able to branch out and kind of break through in that respect. Okay, so here's my simple analysis, and you can expand on it, of LSU this year. And then we're going to go over the schedule a little bit. But my simple analysis is, and you just referenced this, There's no way the defense can be as bad as it was last year. Is this the most talented defense? No, you just reiterated that. But there's no way they can be completely lost as they were in 2023. Conversely, the offense should be good, but I don't know if it's going to be Daniels, Thomas, Neighbors, light up everything, a quarterback rushing for 1,000 and then throwing for 4, and all the things that made LSU so fun to watch last year. But they should be good. I've seen enough of Nussmeier where I believe he can be good. I can't believe the kid didn't transfer. Just about anybody else would in this situation. So where does that, when you take it out of the washing machine, what does it look like for LSU in 2024?
So I think the offense, Mike, is going to be really good. Now, you're right. They're not going to be the same as they were. Like, LSU led the country in total offense and scoring offense last year. Mm-hmm. And I think as time goes along and we give it a historical retrospective on Jaden Daniels, we're going to look back at just how insane that season was. Now, a lot of his successes are going to be muted because that team went 9-3. And in the 3 losses, LSU allowed an average of 48 points to its opponents in their 3 losses. But Jaden Daniels was magnificent. You would literally have to be the number 1 offense in college football again next year to match or best that. So they're not going to do that. But is this an offense that could be top 10 in the country? I think so. A big question about Nussmeier, and it's been the big question about Nussmeier as long as he's been here, has been, can he purge the negative plays? If anybody has the time or tolerance or interest, go look up a highlight or a low light when LSU played Southern in Tiger Stadium a couple of years ago. Nussmeier was in mop-up duty and threw.
I had that game.
Mike, were you there? I thought you
called that game. Yes.
Do you remember the pick 6 he threw heading toward the sideline when he's falling and just shoveled the pass right into the belly of a Southern defender?
Yes.
That was
I think it was Southern's only touchdown.
Didn't
Orgeron's kid get a score in that game? Ed Orgeron had a son that played.
No, I think, was it Frank Wilson's son? Was it Quad Wilson who scored?
I can't remember. I swear Ed Orgeron had a son that played on the other side. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong game.
Ed's son played for McNeese.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm confusing Southern with McNeese. My bad. Apologies to Louisiana Nation.
Suffice to say, Nussmeier needed to purge the bad plays. He was very clean in the bowl game where he threw for nearly 400 yards, led a 98-yard touchdown drive to win it. And he was he looked the part in spring. So if Garrett Nussmeier has matured, that's a huge win. The offensive line, guys, I don't know every offensive line in the country. I'm not going to pretend to, but I would suffice that LSU's is as good as any in the country. They got their bookend tackles are both projected first-round picks. Will Campbell's in everybody's mock draft as the top offensive lineman, top 10 pick. You return 4 starters. 2 of them one's a 4th-year starter, Garrett Dellinger. Another's a 5th-year guy in Miles Frazier. I mean, the offensive line's going to be awesome, and they've got a ridiculous amount of talent at receiver. Just for context, guys, Shelton Sampson was a 5-star. He's going into his redshirt freshman season. He's probably the number 6 receiver on this team. You're right. They don't have Neighbors and they don't have Brian Thomas anymore, but they got plenty there. Offense should be really good, man. You lose Mike Denbrock, so Joe Sloan's the new offensive coordinator. How does that go with him calling plays? That's a fair question to ask, but if LSU's offense doesn't succeed this year, man, it's not going to be because of lack of talent. They got the pieces to be really good again.
Bigger concern early, Southern Cal on a neutral field or SEC opener on the road in Columbia against the Gamecocks?
South Carolina.
Yeah, we agree on that one.
Now, with this caveat, LSU has not won a season opener in their last 4 tries. They lost in the COVID year. They lost to Mississippi State in that game where who is Costello, the Stanford kid?
Yes,
that was a weird game, man.
He's still throwing touchdowns against the LSU secondary.
That kid had about 27 interceptions after that game, too.
He got benched 2 weeks later.
That's right.
True freshman Will Rogers.
He set the SEC single game record and was benched 2 games later. The Bo Pelini experiment, ladies and gentlemen. That they lost to UCLA out in the Rose Bowl in 21 and then lost to Florida State the last 2 years. So LSU hasn't won an opener in their last 4 tries.
Wow.
So there's a little apprehension here about what that's going to look like. But LSU and SC are almost mirror images. The other USC, South Carolina, though, you're going to go on the road at 11 a.m. in an SEC environment, a very underrated environment at Williams-Brice. Like a lot of people around the country who've never been there don't get it. I've seen a winless South Carolina team under Lou Holtz sell out that stadium. That don't happen many places. So that's a great venue. And that's going to be a tough spot, a morning kickoff. I know they're replacing Spencer Rattler, and there's a big question about how that looks. But anytime you got to go on the road in the SEC, it's not easy. And that one has me a little leery. But if LSU gets through that one, guys, I think they go into that game against Ole Miss in the beginning of October undefeated. And if LSU gets a game in Baton Rouge, and if LSU wins that one, I think they're a playoff team. I think at worst they're 10-2, and I think they're in the college football playoff. But it comes down to LSU starting 5-0 if they're able to do it.
I think last time LSU came to Columbia was 2008 because there was a flood in 15 that.
Yep.
So they hadn't been to Williams-Brice in a while. That game in 2008 was the game Steven Garcia got tackled by the referee. I think LSU wasn't that great that year, and I think
no.
South Carolina got a pick six, and I was in the stands, and I got a text from my LSU buddy Mike. I'll just call him Mike. You probably know who he is. And he's like, LSU football's done. They're destroyed. Les Miles is a bum, blah, 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 blah. I just couldn't believe that. I got this long text from my LSU buddy. They ended up winning, and Les ended up having some good years after that, but I'll never forget the emotion coming from my friend in Baton Rouge after that game. But I
remember that game well.
Yeah, 5-0 start. That's because that Ole Miss game. Ole Miss is not proven yet they can win on the road, and being down there, it's always interesting down there.
I think Ole Miss and LSU also, guys. I think they're the way Brian Kelly and Lane Kiffin are building their rosters, and both conceivably are contenders this year. But we can talk about the playoff if y'all want a little bit. But I think it's an interesting test case because they're doing it very differently. Lane Kiffin sees this opportunity, and they have gone pot committed to the portal. They lost, I think, 25 guys to the portal. They added 24. I mean, they have gone pot committed building through the portal. Brian Kelly has said literally since he was hired that he wants to build and develop through the high school ranks and supplement in the portal. So LSU went from like the first year adding 19 portal guys to like 15 to this year adding 9. So Kelly is doing what he said he was going to do. It just remains to be seen, guys, like if that strategy can work in a portal expanded playoff era. And those two teams this year, they've two very good coaches that have built their teams with completely different strategies. And it will be fascinating to see which one actually has the success this year.
Do you ever wonder what it would have looked like if Big Game Hunting got his wish and got Jimbo Fisher for a reported $86 million to take the job?
So are we talking back in 2016?
We're talking in 2016, yeah. There were rumors again about Jimbo in the last cycle.
That was not true.
That was not true.
That was a total non-starter. Was never going to happen.
Right
now in 2016, no, let me go back 2015. So if you remember in 2015, that's when it seemed like Les was going to be fired. They carried him off the field after LSU beat A&M.
Right.
That was very real with Jimbo. And quite honestly, Mike, I mean, now this is 9 years ago now. So if you really wanted to go through some of the details, we can. But suffice to say, there was a deal to be done, and LSU's leadership, the university leadership, just fumbled. But that was going to get done. Like, I have no problem saying that definitively. That was going to get done. When that fell apart, and it actually didn't fall, there was this whole story about how there was a meeting of the Board of Supervisors members, like in the third quarter, and they were retaining Les Miles. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The deal with Jimbo fell apart. They made the decision to keep Les, and they informed the board members during the game that Joe Oliva was going to go make the announcement after the game. That's what happened. But I think Jimbo would have had success here. And it's difficult to say now with the benefit of hindsight and how badly it went at Texas A&M for him. But he would have been inheriting a very different situation at LSU.
Sure.
People forget Les Miles' last team, that 2016 team, guys, your running backs were Leonard Fournette, Darius Geis, Darrell Williams. You had 4 offensive linemen that all went on to play in the NFL. Your quarterback was Brandon Harris. Now, he was a junior at that point. It didn't go great. He ended up losing his job to Danny Etling, but he had bided his time and he was ready. Your receivers were Malachi Dupree, who was a 5-star, Russell Gage, who went on to play in the NFL, and I believe it was Traven Doral was the other who went on to be drafted in the NFL. You had Arden Key, who had an All-American season. You had Lewis Neal at one end, who had 9 sacks. You had Davin Gottschall, who's still in the NFL, drafted by the Dolphins. Your linebackers were Kendall Beckwith, Duke Riley, who both got drafted into the NFL. I think Duke Riley's still playing. Your cornerbacks were Dante Jackson and Tre'Davious White, who was a first-round pick, and Jamal Adams was one of your safeties. My point is, guys, that's a lot of names. I don't expect everybody to remember all those names. That was an NFL team in 2016.
I remember them all. Yeah.
That team should have won the national title in 2016 if they weren't so incompetent. Jimbo Fisher probably could have taken that team. I certainly believe he could have gotten that team into a playoff. And you have to have things fall your way, obviously, in a 14 playoff. But I think at that time in his career, if Jimbo had inherited that 2016 pre-transfer portal LSU team, that's probably a playoff team with a more competent coach.
I've always said this about LSU. They're one of the few programs that can win a title without a dominating quarterback. I mean, all you got to do is look at Matt Flynn and Matt Mauck. And I know they were good college quarterbacks, but let's be honest. I mean, they're not the – when you look at the teams that are winning national titles right now, and it's just like it's almost always a blue chip quarterback. Even if they're not a success at the NFL level, they have that type of skill set. LSU is one of the few that, because they're usually loaded at so many other positions, that in a lot of ways, I think the feeling is, well, just don't screw it up at quarterback. Be solid, don't have to be great, and don't make losing plays, and you can win a lot of games at LSU. You mentioned the playoff, just one playoff question, and then I'll let you run out on one baseball question. The 12-team playoff.
I like talking to you, Mike. I can get a baseball question. I love.
Oh,
that.
Heck yeah! Oh, you know it. I mean, we can circle the gamut. I'll go basketball if you want to.
Matt McMahon. I think they're going to make the tournament this year. But anyway, go ahead.
I do too. I'm a big Matt McMahon guy. Actually, he took over a mess. I look at LSU, and one of the things I was going to go over this week, might have to go over it next week, is we just got done with 12 years of a 14 playoff, and it's amazing. There were only so many schools that actually got to the playoff. Forget about win a title. So it was a very exclusionary group. JC and I call it the cabal. Like, college football is set up for a few programs to be really good for a really long time, and not a whole lot of new people to the party, if you will. Pretty exclusive club. LSU's part of that club, even though they have some sometimes unexplainable and unexpected dips. You know, there haven't been the consistency of a Georgia or Alabama, but they always pop up every few years. So let me give you a scenario. You flick on the microphone after the 12th game of the season, and actually after the selection Sunday, whatever it is, and LSU is not in a 12-team playoff in year 3 under Brian Kelly. What's that offseason look like for the Matt Moscona show in Baton Rouge, syndicated throughout the fine state of Louisiana?
Well, the offseason looks like talking about a lot of LSU baseball, because which makes us a truly unique market with the crossover with New Orleans and Baton Rouge. We can talk about the pro teams and all the LSU teams, but of course you can talk baseball here and it wins. But I understand the context of the question around football. I think there would be disappointment, but I think the biggest question would center around, does Garrett Nussmeier return for a 5th year? Guys, and JC will know this. So Bryce Underwood, who is the number 1 quarterback in the country for 2025, is committed to LSU. And he's a kid out of Michigan. And, I talked to Ryan Clark, who's a good friend. And Ryan coached Bryce Underwood in that big on-3 event, or maybe not on-3, whichever event it was, the one down in Orlando, one of the elite 7-on-7 events. Mm-hmm. And Ryan flat told me, he said, at this point, Bryce Underwood is better at this point than Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, Justin Fields at this point. So there's a lot of people really excited about Bryce Underwood. So the real question, regardless of what happens after the season, Mike, is, does Garrett Nussmeier come back for a 5th season? Or in 2025, is LSU turning over the reins to a 5-star?
But Matt, there's already heat. I'm not saying it's justifiable heat. I mean, you feel it.
There's no heat.
I'm Mike, hours away in Atlanta.
Mike, there's no heat. It's not.
You don't, at Brian Kelly at all. You don't think so?
Literally zero.
I'm not talking about the AD. I'm talking about the fan base.
Every fan base will have its lunatics that are going to say what they want. I'm telling you, it matters not.
Okay.
Brian Kelly signed a 10-year contract whereby he is guaranteed 90% of the remainder of his contract. If LSU were to fire Brian Kelly after the season, they would owe him $68 million.
I understand. This is not a hot seat question. This is a fan base that wasn't exactly enamored, many of them. And again, I'm a Brian Kelly guy. I'll defend Brian Kelly to the moon. I think he's a terrific coach. I think it was a great hire. But it was not the most popular hire, I think it's safe to say. Right? I mean, there was a lot of, does he really fit here? And then there's been some losses where it's like, man, oh man, I don't know. So you're there every day. You're in the pit, if you will. I just sense that if somehow LSU goes a third year where they're not a legitimate national championship type of team, that there'll be a portion of that fan base. And I'm not just talking about the lunatic fringe. I'm talking about a fair percentage will be like, I don't know about this. I don't know. Because the feeling is that you can plug and play almost any coach, and you're going to have elite talent on both sides of the ball, because we've talked about this. You have it all the time at LSU, right? This is not the Curly Hallman era. Right. This is not the Archer era. Like, this is the post-Saban era. And you walk into that job, it's not that unlike in Alabama, where you're expected, 10 wins is like the baseline. You're expected to be playing for high prizes. And so I just wonder if somehow that does not happen in 2024, if maybe it gets a little bit toxic there.
Yeah. So it's a fair question. The Kelly hire here was well received. I think there's a national perception about Baton Rouge where, like, you have to be able to spell chifuncta and eat etouffee to coach at LSU, which is just not the case. I mean, Mike, I've given this example a million times. The winningest coaches in the history of LSU athletics, Skip Bertman, a Jewish guy from Miami. South Louisiana is heavily Roman Catholic. Right. Nick Saban from West Virginia, spent his whole career in the Midwest, and Dale Brown was from Minot, North Dakota. You don't have to be from here. You just have to win and embrace the culture. And Brian Kelly's done that. So
totally agree. I don't think it's a culture thing. Really? I think it's the last three coaches won a national title, one of which many people consider a boob, if we're being honest, and Les Miles. A lot of people, even though Ed Orgeron's the native son in Louisiana, thick and thin, they look at him as just kind of the David Putty of the SEC coaching fraternity, kind of a laughing stock in some ways. And so, if they can do it, how in the hell would Brian Kelly need more than 3 years to do it? I think that's not fair, but life isn't fair when you're the head coach in Baton Rouge.
Well, here's the difference. So Les Miles inherited a team 1 year removed from a national championship. Mm-hmm. Ed Orgeron inherited the 2016 team as the interim that we just talked about. Brian Kelly inherited a team that had a sub 500 record the 2 years before he got the job.
Good point. Yes.
And a team that played a bowl game against Kansas State with 38 eligible scholarship players and a receiver, John Trey Kirkland, playing quarterback.
Right.
And that's not lost on people here. Now, Mike, I'm listening. Your intuition is right, because LSU fan base, just as a whole, they're not patient people. They want to win. They expect to win. But I think there's also context available with what Brian Kelly inherited that people understand. And in spite of those back-to-back losing seasons, or the 500 season, then a sub 500 season, I think it was the combined record was like 11-12 the 2 years prior. But anyway, they did win back-to-back 10-win seasons. That's 9 in the regular season. But in year one, he got to Atlanta, beat Alabama, and that gains you a lot of merit in these parts. And then now with Nick Saban gone and an expanded playoff, it feels like the path isn't quite as treacherous as it was. Guys, for me, the most interesting thing about this season, and so all that to say, if they go 9-3 this year, but you see improvement defensively and you're really solid offensively, and you could sell this 25 and 26 recruiting classes back to back and say, look out, like it's about to get really good, I think people would buy that going into 25 with heightened expectations. I'm going to be so fascinated by this year, though, guys, because I don't know if you all agree, but I think you look at the SEC, and Georgia and Texas, I think, looking at their schedules and their rosters, are as close to a lock as you can get for the playoff. I think they're going to be in a 12-team playoff. After that, I think you have a group of 5 teams probably vying for one spot, and it's LSU and Ole Miss and Missouri and Bama and Tennessee. And I think those 5 however it shakes out, are probably vying for 1, maybe 2 spots. So you have 5 teams that I just mentioned whose all their fan bases have a realistic expectation that this could be a team in a 12-team playoff. And I think 4 of those fan bases are going to be really disappointed. So we're all kind of exploring this whole new 12-team playoff world together to see how it all plays out. And LSU's right in the thick of that.
No doubt. Let you get out on this. I know we have a number of listeners in the SEC. We've got a number located in South Carolina. The Paul Maneri hire there. I know you got to know Paul obviously very well, covering LSU baseball as well as you do. What'd you think of it?
A lot of people were surprised. I was not surprised at all. Let me say this, Mike. I was not surprised at all that Paul Maneri is coaching again. A little surprised that it's the South Carolina job. Both that Carolina would hire him at this stage and that he would take that job, because I think that's a really tough job right now. But you know, when Paul retired back after the 21 season, I don't want to say it was a forced retirement, because that's not the right way to say it. I think it was just a mutually agreed upon time to move on. And there can be coexisting realities. You can agree that Paul Maneri had an amazing run in Baton Rouge, which he did. He won a title, played for another, got to Omaha 5 times. Anywhere else, literally anywhere else, they're building a statue for that guy.
Sure.
But he just happens to coach at the place that had the greatest coach in the history of college baseball, and Skip Bertman, who won 5 titles in 10 years. And so anything anybody does is never going to match that. But Paul just really endeared himself here. He and Karen built a house here. He's still very visible around LSU. And I saw Coach a few weeks back having lunch. He and Karen talked to him for a little bit. He still has a great zest for the game. He's a coach. I'd never surprised me. Like he entertained Notre Dame and Miami the last 2 off seasons. So I'm not surprised at all that he's coaching again. I just think South Carolina is tough because Ray Tanner won 2 national titles, played for 3 consecutive national titles, and that is the expectation in Columbia. I don't know that they have the resources there in the NIL world to compete with Tennessee and LSU and Texas A&M. And we'll see what, if Vanderbilt continues to play this game. But there are just so many programs that have committed financial and facility resources in this era to be great that it's harder now ever to win. And Carolina's kind of bumped down to the middle of the pack in the league. So I think there's no doubt Paul Maneri can coach, and I think he can still coach, and he'll having Monty Lee, keeping him on staff and bringing in Terry Rooney are great hires. It's really just a matter of, will he be able to get the players to win at the level they expect? And I don't know the answer to that. That's something you'd have to ask people around JC may know, people around South Carolina who could answer the question about what resources are Ray Tanner and those boosters willing to pump into baseball at this point.
I think it's about to go up, honestly, with that hire, and in the last few years being what they've been. I think that's about to go up dramatically. What is a ballpark NIL figure for LSU baseball? Do you have any idea? Because I know it's not public record. We're all just kind of piecing numbers together. But I mean, I've been told, just when I'm on the road, Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee under Vitello,
Florida.
Well, you missed the biggest one, which is A&M.
Well, I was getting there. Trust me.
Yeah.
Not to mention 85 million. Yeah.
So I'll tell you that 2 years ago, and I've had a lot of very candid conversations. So I did a podcast with an NIL podcast for a couple of years with one of the executives at Matchpoint, which is a Baton Rouge-based company that effectively acts as a conduit for universities and businesses and brands and athletes and all that sort of stuff. And as a result, we talked to head coaches and athletic directors and heads of collectives and boosters. I mean, everyone from John Ruiz at Miami to I got very plugged into the NIL world. I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, LSU's baseball NIL budget was leading the way, and it doubled Arkansas's.
Right.
That is not the case anymore because Texas A&M and Tennessee, as you mentioned, stepped up. The number I was told for Braden Montgomery last year, and I guess I could put this out there. I don't know that this would be irresponsible to say it, but I was told that Braden Montgomery, when he came from Stanford, that Texas A&M gave him $750,000.
I've heard numbers close to that for other players.
I mean, for
not
1
quite
year,
750, but yeah, I've heard 600 for a couple guys. I've heard half a mil. Yeah, it's a different. People think baseball non-revenue sport. Like, no, NIL and some of these SEC programs is out. It's just insane.
When you're
crazy.
Pumping that kind of money into a player for a 1 year mercenary deal, and Braden Montgomery is magnificent. Please don't misunderstand me. Had he come to LSU, he would have been the right fielder day one and would have closed for LSU and probably hit third in the lineup. They wanted him badly. But how do you tell that kid to turn down that kind of money? So for some kids, it's going to be about getting a check. For other kids, it's going to be experience and the coaching staff. And some it's going to be a combo therein. Look, LSU's got a lot to offer, but so does Tennessee, and so does Texas A&M, and so does Florida. And it's hard to win those battles now. It's harder than ever to win those battles. It used to be at LSU, you could come show people the 7 national title trophies and the pretty stadium and the sellout crowds, and anybody would want to play for it. It's just not that way anymore. It's just harder than ever.
For right now, money means so much more in baseball because nobody's on full scholarship. Half these kids are paying to go to school. They're paying for the right to play on the baseball team. And a place like LSU or South Carolina or wherever else where it matters, they're getting dog cussed just like the football players and baseball, and they're paying to do it. And you're fighting the draft and bonuses and everything else in that sport. So it's going to be interesting to see if they do go to full scholarships for that sport in the SEC, which I think they will. You know, what the numbers look like then. You know, $600,000 for Braden Montgomery at a place that cares. That's probably a little overpaying. But I total budget, you know, any school that I've heard that's $750 and above is in pretty good shape in baseball.
Yeah, I think
football and basketball are different, but baseball is about $750 to $2 is a nice budget. So
I think all the players at a place like LSU, they're not coming out of pocket. That's one of the things that NIL has done is it has completely mitigated the out of pocket spend in an 11.7 scholarship world. So. I mean, you're right, JC. I mean, the 11.7 still exists, but I think that's how they fill the gap at a place like LSU is that none of these guys have to pay to come to school.
Yeah. Well, Skip Bertman was way ahead of his time in terms of how to navigate through some of those waters as well. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. I mean, I was part of being a great program during that time frame. How do you find some avenues to escape this ridiculous restriction on kids getting a full ride? Matt, no restrictions on you today. We kept you long. Wanted to have you on here for a while and hope we can do it again. And next time I'm in Baton Rouge, we need to get together, maybe have one of those drinks behind you in your extensive liquor cabinet. Nice backdrop.
If you're a whiskey guy, I got you covered. Just come on over. You'll find
whiskey and bourbon. You don't have to ask me twice.
Yeah, you'll find few bars in town that have quite the selection that's back there. There's a few of them, but not many.
Yeah, no, you got it going on. Matt, thank you so much. Keep up the great work on the afternoon show. And again, we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks, Matt.
Right, guys. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. It's Matt Moscona, covers LSU as well as anybody over there on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge Radio. Final timeout. Some final thoughts on a little Fiverr dimer when we come back here on JC and Morgan.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a Mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit SiteProRentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
All right, welcome back. It is JC and Morgan. Final segment here this Tuesday. Hope everybody is doing well out there. Again, we're part of the Chief Sports Network. Check out the app. A number of shows, a little more on the local side, as well as what we discuss, which is national. We just discussed some national stuff with Matt Moscona, including LSU. Group 5 John with his weekly update. We missed this with Luganville. We went over time last week, JC, but I always like getting John's Group 5 love, his Group 5 update. We're not just elitists here. We don't just talk about the Power 4, which who knows? In a year could be the Power 3. We might just be the Power 2 when JC and Morgan is talking in 2026. You never know. This is from John. He says, a lot of talk about schools moving from one P5 conference to another P5. There's one G5 school moving into a P5. That school, of course, is, drum roll please, SMU, from the American to the ACC. But did you know there are two schools moving into G5 conferences for 2024? Army is going from independent to the American. They replace SMU. So the American now will stay at 14 teams. Army, Charlotte, ECU, FAU, Memphis Navy, North Texas, Rice, USF, Temple, Tulane, Tulsa, UAB, and UTSA. The Army-Navy rivalry game, which will take place on December the 14th at Commanders Field in Landover, Maryland, is now a conference game. Army's first American game will take place September 26th at Temple. You like Army and the American? Feel good about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. Are they an American for basketball too? I guess. I guess the teams that left were like they were your better basketball programs in that league. So, I mean, Army and Navy struggle in that. I don't think they're in. I don't think Navy's in for basketball either. But
okay.
Anyway, yeah, because you've gotten rid of.
I know UConn. Navy's not. I know Navy's not.
You've gotten rid of UConn and Houston and Cincinnati, and so you've kind of cleared some spot hoops wise. But no, I like that.
Did they play in the Patriot? Right? Isn't there
it's the
Patriot Conference?
I like it because that's if Navy can be in a conference and Air Force can be in a conference, why can't Army? And I think it's good. It's intriguing to have that as a conference game. Heck, who knows? It could come down to that game as the conference winner or something. There's some sort of weird tiebreaker they're doing to accommodate that game in addition to the conference championship game. I'll have to look that up. But no, I like Army being in a league. Like I said, if Navy and Air Force can do it, why can't they? The conference is called the American Conference. So there you go.
Yeah.
There's nothing more American than Army and Navy.
There is nothing more American. That's still on the bucket list. There's few venues or events that I have not witnessed in college football in person that I really want to. That's one of them.
Yeah. One thing for chat row. Cam asked about SMU. I'd go ahead with your thought though.
Well, I was just going to say you were spot on. Army and Navy are in the Patriot League, which includes Boston, Bucknell, Colgate, Holy Cross, Lafayette, Lehigh, Loyola, Maryland. That's, of course, their basketball conference. And I'm guessing some other Olympic sports as well. Okay. What were you saying about SMU? Cam was asking.
Cam in chat row asked, could SMU revive itself in the new landscape of college football with Texas money? Absolutely. The other day, Alabama flipped a quarterback from SMU. All right.
Yeah.
Start looking at their recruiting, because now that they're in a Power 5 conference and have a better, clear path to the playoff, which is something that even with money will keep kids away. Like Memphis has got NIL money. There, people aren't lining up to play for Memphis because, hey, you got to go undefeated to make the playoff. Chances are slim of that happening. But SMU now has a path. If you talk to coaches around the ACC, that's the thing they say. They're not really scared of Stanford and Cal, but they're
Right.
like, other than it's a pain in the butt to go all the way across the country, but they're like, watch out for SMU.
SMU.
Because they're like Wake Forest as far as their setup with college goes, but they have rabid, committed fans.
And history.
As we all saw in the 80s.
Money.
And money. You smell, Mike says you can smell the money going
Smell
through
it right when you get near the fringes of the campus. It's like, this is not your typical Dallas smell.
And I'll say this, I got my Miami question for looking at 24/7 Sports predicted the records of every team in the conference like they always do. It's list season. And I looked through the ACC when I saw Miami at 10-2 or something. Guess it was 9-3.
SMU. Yeah.
Rhett Lashley, the fighting Rhett Lashley. So, man, they're already, according to some of the experts, better than most of the league. So what happens if they start getting some of that top Texas talent?
Look, they had some good years under June Jones. SMU has not been a dumpster fire. They've actually been a quietly good program.
Yeah, Sonny Dykes was there.
Sonny Dykes, absolutely. They have quietly been a good football program that hasn't quite been like the Boise States or the Houstons or some of the other teams that when they were Group 5 were sneaking into big bowl games. But I still maintain, and I know people get bogged down and bored with hearing about all the money and everything else, but they did one of the biggest flexes I've ever seen in college athletics to basically say, you take us ACC and you don't have to give us a dime in TV money. Like that is, in this day and age, that doesn't exist. No one else is doing that. They did it, and they're not done spending. So I think they're a fascinating story. I am pro SMU. I want Craig James and Eric Dickerson to be on the sideline with media passes and cheering on a 9-2 SMU team this season. I would love to see it if somehow that could happen. By the way, the other one on Group 5, John's team moving up to the from FBS now to Conference USA, Kennesaw State. I should say FCS, Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State will give Conference USA 10 teams. Now, you want to talk about an eclectic group? FIU, this is the Conference USA that we now know. That so many there was a time where Conference USA was kind of a quiet, badass league, and then the leadership basically just drove it into oblivion. FIU, Jacksonville State, Liberty, La Tech, Middle Tennessee, New Mexico State, Sam Houston, UTEP, Western Kentucky, and now Kennesaw State, which is campus is located about 30 miles from my house. Yeah, it's a hodgepodge of teams, but good luck to Kennesaw. It's a huge school, a big enrollment. I've run into a number of Kennesaw State grads, and I know some people that played baseball there. Like, they're a prideful group, and they made the necessary move. Good luck to Kennesaw State in their new league.
Pretty good at baseball. They played, one game in college baseball, doesn't matter, but they beat Clemson 18-1 in the game this year.
Yeah.
And their basketball team, before their coach left, went to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago.
That's right. I had them in a baseball game against Georgia. Ben McDonald and I on a weird Tuesday night game years ago, and they had a first round catcher. So they've got some chops in the other sports.
It could end up like a UCF or USF at some point. It's the same.
That's what they're hoping.
Gigantic major commuter school in a big metropolitan area. I mean,
Georgia Tech's not doing anything. Maybe they can just supplant Georgia Tech as the number 2 university in the state of Georgia. All right, JC, we don't have the fancy 5 and dimer because our producer Mad Dog had to scurry out.
Get to his next job.
So I'll just do it. It's now time for Fiverr, Dimer, or neither. Presented by Site Pro Rentals. Call 972-RENT-NOW for better equipment rental. All right. I went just these 3 movies that have popped up lately on social media or random cable. One of the things that popped up, too, is a Gene Wilder documentary. on I think it's on Netflix right now. Pretty cool stuff. You think about Gene Wilder's career from Blazing Saddles to I never got into the Young Frankenstein movie, and Willy Wonka and a few other. I mean, he's got his name on some pretty landmark films. But one of my favorites of all time was Silver Streak with him and Richard Pryor, which was the beginning of that comedic duo that starred in several movies. I thought the two were brilliant in the movie. This was and is a dimer. When it's on cable, the remote is dropped. I'm locked in. I don't even know if you've seen it, JC, but it's a dimer for me.
I've seen it once when I was a kid.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's always, I mean, I'm with you on the comedic duo and all that, but it's yeah. You know, I'm trying to find the other Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder movies.
Oh,
I've seen Stir Crazy.
Stir Crazy's great.
See No Evil, Hear No Evil was hilarious. Another You was hilarious.
That might have been their last one.
Silver Streak was the first one that came out the year I was born, so it may have been a little before. I mean, I'll have to go back and watch it because I'm sure
it used to be on cable. That's how I got to see it. I didn't see it in the theater. It was cable. It just used to be on cable all the time, and it was just the two of them are just brilliant together. Oh, and I don't think they even knew each other when they signed on for that film. And then the friendship formed, and the rest is history, as they say.
And I miss Richard Pryor so much.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I'll show you this right now.
Way ahead of his time.
You told Bill Cosby that I said, anyway. Have a Coke and a smile. Anyway.
That's from Eddie Murphy Raw, yeah. The Social Network, which is basically the Facebook story. Fiverr for me. I thought they did a good job with this flick.
Fiverr for me too. The guy who's the kid that played Zuckerberg.
I knew you were going to ask me that. I forgot his name.
I know his name.
He's been in a few other movies, but this was by far and away.
He and this other kid have like the kid that was in Superbad, Michael Cera, and this kid have like the same acting style. It's like an Ethan Hawkish kind of deal.
Jesse Eisenberg.
Jesse Eisenberg. Same kind of like understated dude. It's funny. My friend Charles Power, who's one of the best, we've talked about recruiting, one of the best recruiting analysts in the country, has that personality. Like he's a lot like Jesse Eisenberg and Michael Cera. It's weird. Just kind of this understated kind of intellectual guy. But I thought he did a great job. You know, Justin Timberlake is in that movie. I think Justin Timberlake
was great in it.
One of the more underrated talents of our time. And at the time it came out too, Facebook was like the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've completely screwed it up. Yeah. I think they did because of politics. They couldn't leave well enough alone. And
that's Zuckerberg.
And it scared the crap.
We got to be careful. We're on Facebook. Hope he doesn't shut us down.
Yeah, I mean,
point out the obvious.
If they'd have just said, "Look, we're not a news organization. We're just a vehicle. We're kind of like, the actual internet. We're just a platform." And let everybody continue to put their news out there and stuff like that. Because like people my mother's age and that the younger baby boomers for a long time started getting their news on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Now there's some fake news out there. There's no question, but most of the American people are pretty smart. They're not dumb. They can figure out, this may be fake or not. And then he changes the algorithm and it goes back to just seeing pictures of people's kids and a bunch of ads. And the traffic's gone down, and some news companies went out of business because they had hitched their wagons to the algorithm. But I do like that movie. It's a Fiverr for me. Probably not quite a dimer because it's not on a whole lot, but it's one of those things that when it's on, I will watch it unless there's like something else that I'm hunting. But it was a well done flick.
It's a well done flick. Zuckerberg thinks that his whole thing about feeling inadequate with women and everything, and that's what kind of motivated him to be this nerdy guy that, well, I can't get the girl and I'm not athletic, but look at me, I'm going to invent Facebook, which some would say he stole from the Winklevoss twins or the Winklevi, as he says in the movie. He denies a lot of that. Who knows? But there's always creative license, dramatic license when you do a film like this. It's kind of a biopic, but the writing, it's an Aaron Sorkin movie. And if you're familiar with Sorkin, whether it's TV or film, and this is what I love about certain movies, I need you to be able to write. I don't need special effects. Okay. As I always said, I don't need people wearing a cape flying. And that's not bringing me to the theater. I need somebody who knows how to friggin' write a screenplay and have intelligent dialogue. And this movie is full of it. It's absolutely full of it. So it's a $5. But if they start running it again on cable, it could be a dimer for me. It's acted, it's well written, it's well done.
The West Wing alone should tell you. I mean, that you could binge that show for forever. With Aaron Sorkin, he's very good, very talented.
Yeah. Somebody says Army Hammer before he got canceled. He's one of the Winklevosses. I didn't know he got canceled. I don't even want to know what for. Who knows?
Oh,
maybe it was Zuckerberg was canceled.
Cannibalism. I read an article about this guy. Yeah,
he's a cannibal.
He got accused of being a cannibal by some woman.
Oh, well, that'll do it. That'll get you canceled.
There was an article on CNN or Fox, one of the TV news apps. It's like Army Hammer putting his life together after cannibalism accusations. And apparently he had left a voice. I mean, I kind of think it's probably drugs, but left a voicemail saying, "I just want to take out your rib and cook it up and eat you. I bet it's delicious."
Oh man.
I mean, was he serious? You know, I mean, you ever heard my grandmother? I've heard grandmothers in the South say, "You look so good, I want to sop you up like a gravy on a biscuit." You know, that doesn't mean she's a cannibal.
Yeah.
Does it? I don't know. It was a little weird. I mean, but still, I was like, that's something you don't hear every day. I'm recovering from tarnishing my reputation. I got accused of being a cannibal.
Yeah. Yeah, we're used to people being canceled for having the gall to say maybe having 17 vaccinations for COVID isn't a good idea. This guy's out there like, yeah, I want to eat her calf muscle. That's a little bit different level.
Yeah, dude, that's probably a reason they should cancel you right there. Is if you actually
that's
have
a hard
those
one to
desires.
recover from.
But apparently he didn't. Apparently it was either a joke or something like that. So after therapy, but it was like he was rebounding.
Okay.
In his career. So it's funny you mentioned him, SC Scout guy, because that's I happened to read that yesterday.
Yeah. Cannibalism, I didn't think it was still, it had a run. It had a brief run there for a while back in the serial killer murderer days. And maybe if you're in a plane crash and you're abandoned with like 7 other people and there's no food, all of a sudden it's like, if I put them over an open pit, it wouldn't taste so bad with the proper seasoning. But I can't justify it. I'm sorry, I can't.
I couldn't do it, man.
Nah,
I'd eat snow. I just eat snow and try to survive that way.
I'd try and make a bark smoothie out of a tree or something. All right, final one. Devil's Advocate. Devil's Advocate, Pacino and Keanu. And a very young and vivacious Charlize Theron. Yeah, nobody knew who she was before this movie.
It's a Ben Franklin for me.
Really? I did not see that coming.
Sits up there on his fat, sick
He's laughing at you.
He's laughing his sick ass off.
Eat but don't taste. Touch but don't feel.
Dude, that's peak overacting Al Pacino. But
without question.
I love peak overacting Al Pacino.
You're getting it here.
And Keanu Reeves is a terrible actor anyway. Although I've gained more respect for him lately.
What are you talking about, bro?
Everything's like Bill and Ted. They put him in Much Ado About Nothing, which I was actually in that show in college. That's the last time I ever spoke an iambic pentameter in my life. I was Baracchio. But anyway, I digress. So they put him in the Much Ado About Nothing with Denzel freaking Washington as the lead. And Keanu's the evil prince. And he's like, "Art thou, bro? Now he's good at certain things. Point Break. I wouldn't have anybody else do it. Nobody else could be Johnny Utah, but freaking Keanu Reeves.
Well, you're not into the whole what's the movies that he's
Wicker, not Wicker, Wick. I like those okay. And
I never watched any of them. Again, not my thing.
Apparently, Keanu Reeves is like an outstanding human being.
That's what everybody says.
To help people. So I don't really want to say anything bad about it, but in that movie, I even excused it because I was like the contrast between, the devil, you're just Satan, dude. And then Charlize Theron made the movie. I didn't mind Al Pacino overacting. It was a very interesting movie. I thought I watched it a lot.
There is one SEC town connection in this movie. the scene opens up at a random bar. I doubt the movie ever took place in Gainesville, but they say it's Gainesville.
Go Gators.
And it's Keanu. He's celebrating winning another case. And it's Keanu at the bar. But later on in the movie, when Charlize Theron, who we'd all like to keep happy, she's upset. She doesn't like living in New York. She's a small town girl, wants to get back into a small town. And Keanu, in the worst Southern accent perhaps of all time, says, and I quote, "I'm not going back to Gainesville." It's just so utterly
awful.
bad. I'm not going back to Gainesville. It's like there are people in the South that actually have walked upright and speak in a slight accent, but not quite. He kind of goes for it there, and it doesn't hit the mark. I'm with you though. I don't think this is a great movie, but it's a dimer, and that when it's on, I am captivated. I don't know why.
Yeah. Supporting cast is awesome as well. You've got Jeffrey Jones, who was the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Speaking of a guy who got canceled, he ain't a cannibal, but he's got some issues.
Yeah, he was in it. Judith Ivey was in it. Connie Nielsen was in it. And Craig T. Nelson, a.k.a. Coach, a.k.a. the dad from Poltergeist, a.k.a. the coach from All the Right
Moves.
You're
just a typing coach. You're just a typing teacher.
In the movie, dude. I mean, yeah, cameos from Don King and Roy Jones Jr.
That's right.
I mean, it was a pretty daggum solid flick. I mean, like I said, look, if I want to be scared to death about the devil and the Antichrist, I'll watch The Omen. That's actually a little bit creepy. Or The Exorcist.
The Exorcist.
This was more entertaining, but
yeah,
still, I mean, it's like, but it also did kind of make you think about morals and good versus evil and all that good stuff. But Al Pacino, that's gonna. Hey, you doing? What's up, Kevin? How are you, Kevin?
Never let him see it coming. Never let us see it coming.
That subway scene where he starts talking in Spanish.
Oh yeah.
Like, go on, bye now.
There's still time. There's still time. $57 million budget. It grossed $153 million at the box office in 1997. So whether you like the movie, don't like the movie, everybody got paid in this bad boy. That's the Devil's Advocate. A Ben Franklin for JC, a dimer for me, and that concludes Fiverr, dimer, or neither. That concludes another power-packed, action-packed installment of JC and Morgan. Our thanks again to Matt Moscona for joining us and talking some LSU. We'll be back next week. Might be a time to get our buddy Tim Brando back on. It's been a while since Timmy B has given his thoughts. A lot of things have happened since we talked to him last. We'll check in with the guest line on somebody. We'll see if that is ripe and ready to pick off the vine. Until then, for our award-winning producer, Phil Molinax, the Mad Dog, and for JC, this is Mike saying so long. Thanks again for tuning in to the show that is on campus 52 weeks out of the year. JC and Morgan. So long.